My heart broke when my father raised his champagne glass at my wedding reception and said, "To Ashley and Michael, may their love be stronger than Ashley's simple career aspirations." The entire ballroom erupted in laughter, and I felt my cheeks burn as guests nodded knowingly at each other, clearly thinking I was some kind of underachiever who got lucky in love. My husband's family looked mortified, probably regretting that their son married someone they now saw as completely ordinary. I was fighting back tears when suddenly my emergency phone started ringing, the one that only 5 people in Washington had the number to. Then my secure pager, then my classified communication device. Multiple calls from Pentagon officials, Homeland Security directors, and intelligence chiefs were all trying to reach me simultaneously. Because while my family was busy humiliating me in front of everyone I cared about, a crisis was developing that only someone with my level of security clearance and expertise could handle. Before we dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you've experienced family betrayal, hit that like button, you're not alone. My name is Ashley Thompson, well, Ashley Martinez now, and today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it became the day everything changed forever. But let me start from the beginning, because this story goes much deeper than one humiliating wedding toast. Growing up as the middle child in the Thompson family meant being invisible most of the time. My older brother Jake was the star athlete who got a full ride to Duke University and now works as a sports agent in Los Angeles. My younger sister Emma became a successful influencer with 2 million followers on social media. And then there was me, quiet Ashley, who always had her nose buried in books about international relations and security studies. My parents never quite knew what to make of me. While Jake was scoring touchdowns and Emma was posting viral dance videos, I was studying Arabic and Mandarin in my bedroom. When other kids were at parties, I was reading declassified CIA documents that had been released to the public. My family thought I was just a weird bookworm with no social skills. But I had a dream. Ever since I was 12 years old and watched a documentary about 9/11, I knew I wanted to work in national security. I wanted to be part of protecting our country from threats that most people never even knew existed. My family, however, saw this as just another one of Ashley's strange obsessions. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, my parents were proud for about 5 minutes before Jake's college recruitment started dominating every conversation. When I got accepted to Georgetown's prestigious School of Foreign Service, my dad said, "That's nice, honey, but Jake's coach thinks he might make it to the NFL." When I graduated magna cum laude with a degree in international security studies, my mom's first question was whether I'd met any nice boys. The day I got my first job offer from the Department of Defense, I was so excited I could barely contain myself. I ran into the kitchen where my parents were having breakfast and announced, "I got the job. I'm going to be working for the Pentagon." My dad looked up from his newspaper and said, "Oh good, government jobs have decent benefits. Very sensible choice for someone like you." Someone like me. Those words stung more than he probably realized. But I pushed forward anyway, because I knew what I was capable of, even if my family didn't. My first position was entry-level, working in the Defense Intelligence Agency as a junior analyst. My family assumed I was some kind of secretary or filing clerk. When they asked what I did at work, I had to give vague answers because most of my actual duties were classified. "I analyze information and write reports," I'd say, which technically was true but barely scratched the surface of what I really did. Over the next 8 years, I worked my way up through various departments and agencies. I earned my master's degree in strategic intelligence from the National Intelligence University. I completed advanced training programs that I couldn't even tell my family existed. I learned to speak 4 languages fluently and gained expertise in counterterrorism, cyber warfare, and international threat assessment. But to my family, I was still just Ashley with her boring government job. They'd introduce me at parties as, "This is Ashley, she works for the government doing something with computers." The truth was, by the time I was 30 years old, I held a top-secret security clearance with sensitive compartmented information access, which meant I was privy to some of the most classified intelligence in the United States government. When Jake got married 3 years ago, my parents spent $30,000 on his bachelor party weekend in Vegas. When Emma launched her makeup line, they invested $50,000 to help her get started. When I got promoted to senior intelligence analyst, they forgot to even congratulate me. The pattern was always the same. Jake's achievements were celebrated with champagne and phone calls to every relative. Emma's social media milestones got shared on my parents' Facebook pages with lengthy proud parent posts. My accomplishments, the ones I could actually talk about, were met with polite nods and quick subject changes to more interesting topics, like Jake's latest client signing or Emma's brand partnerships. Little did I know that my years of being overlooked and underestimated were about to pay off in the most unexpected way. 2 years ago, I met Michael Martinez at a security conference in Washington, D.C. He was a cybersecurity consultant for private corporations, and I was there representing my agency, though I couldn't tell him which one at first. We bonded over our shared passion for protecting digital infrastructure and our frustration with people who didn't understand the complexity of modern security threats. Michael came from a completely different world than mine. His family owned a successful chain of upscale restaurants throughout the Northeast. His parents, Roberto and Isabella Martinez, had built their empire from nothing, starting with a single food truck and growing it into a multimillion-dollar business. They valued hard work, achievement, and success in ways that resonated with me. When Michael and I started dating seriously, I finally felt like someone understood my drive and ambition. He appreciated my dedication to my career, even though I couldn't share many details about what I actually did. His family welcomed me warmly, though I could tell they were curious about my mysterious government job. The contrast between our families became apparent the first time Michael met mine. We'd been dating for 6 months when I brought him home for Thanksgiving. Jake was there with his wife Sarah, fresh from closing a deal with a Major League Baseball player. Emma had flown in from LA where she'd just signed a contract with a major cosmetics company. At dinner, my parents went around the table sharing everyone's recent accomplishments. Jake talked about his new client worth $12 million. Emma showed off the designer purse she'd gotten for free from a brand partnership deal. When it was my turn, I mentioned that I'd received a commendation from my supervisor for outstanding work on a recent project. "That's nice, dear," my mother said dismissively, then immediately turned to Michael. "So tell us about your business." Michael has his own cybersecurity consulting firm, she announced to the table, as if this was far more impressive than anything I'd ever accomplished. Michael squeezed my hand under the table, sensing my discomfort. Later that night, he said, "I don't understand why they don't see how incredible you are. The way you talk about your work, the passion you have for protecting people, it's inspiring." But I couldn't tell him the whole truth either. Not yet. The engagement happened on a beautiful Saturday morning in Rock Creek Park. Michael had planned an elaborate scavenger hunt that ended at the spot where we'd had our first official date. When he got down on one knee, I felt like my heart might explode with happiness. For the first time in my life, someone saw me as worthy of being chosen first, of being someone's priority. My family's reaction to our engagement was typical. They were happy for me, but in that patronizing way that suggested they were surprised anyone would want to marry boring Ashley. "Michael seems like such a catch," my mother kept saying, as if she couldn't believe he'd settle for me. Michael's family, on the other hand, threw us an engagement party at their flagship restaurant. Roberto made a toast about how lucky Michael was to find someone as intelligent and dedicated as me. Isabella pulled me aside and said, "We can tell how much you love each other. That's all that matters to us." Planning the wedding became a source of constant stress, mainly because of my family's attitude. They kept making comments about how generous Michael's family was being with the expenses, as if I was some kind of charity case who couldn't contribute equally. The truth was, I made a very good salary, but I couldn't explain exactly why without revealing classified information about my security clearance level. 3 weeks before the wedding, something happened that changed everything, though I didn't realize it at the time. I was called into my supervisor's office for what I thought would be a routine meeting. Instead, I found myself face to face with Deputy Director Patricia Hayes, one of the most powerful people in the intelligence community. She offered me a promotion that would change the trajectory of my entire career. "Ashley," she said, "you've been selected for a very special position. You'd be joining the Pentagon's Strategic Intelligence Oversight Committee as a senior director. This would put you in charge of coordinating intelligence sharing between agencies for matters of national security. Only 47 people in the country have this level of access to classified information. My hands started shaking as she continued. The position comes with a substantial salary increase and the highest possible security clearance. You'd be briefing cabinet members and occasionally even the president's national security team. But I need to warn you, this job will require even more secrecy than what you're used to. Most of your friends and family will never know what you really do. I accepted immediately. It was everything I'd worked for, everything I'd dreamed of since I was 12 years old. But the timing couldn't have been more complicated. Just weeks before my wedding. The background investigation process was intense and had to be completed quickly. Federal agents interviewed my neighbors, former professors, and childhood friends. They conducted financial audits and psychological evaluations. The whole process had to be done secretly, so when my family asked why government cars kept showing up at my apartment building, I had to lie and say it was routine security updates for all employees. 2 days before the wedding, I got the call. I'd been cleared for the highest level of security access in the United States government. Starting Monday after my honeymoon, I would be one of the most powerful intelligence officials in America. But I couldn't tell anyone, not even Michael, not yet. That's when everything changed. That's when my family's years of treating me like I was worthless finally caught up with them. The wedding ceremony itself was beautiful. Michael looked handsome in his black tuxedo, and I felt like a princess in my grandmother's vintage lace dress. We exchanged vows in the historic chapel at Georgetown University, surrounded by 200 of our closest friends and family members. For those 30 minutes, I felt like the most important person in the world. But then came the reception. The ballroom at the Four Seasons was decorated with white roses and gold accents, everything elegant and perfect. Michael's family had insisted on paying for most of the reception, which my parents seemed both grateful for and embarrassed about. The dinner was delicious, the band was playing all our favorite songs, and I was finally starting to relax and enjoy being the center of attention for once in my life. That's when my father decided to make his toast. He stood up, champagne glass in hand, and tapped a knife against it to get everyone's attention. The room fell quiet as all 200 guests turned to listen to what the father of the bride had to say. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "thank you all for being here to celebrate Ashley and Michael's special day. So far, so good." Then his tone shifted slightly, taking on that patronizing quality I knew so well. "You know, we always worried about Ashley growing up. She was always so serious, always had her nose in those boring books about politics and world affairs. While her brother was out winning football games and her sister was entertaining people with her creativity, Ashley was just different." I felt my stomach starting to twist, but surely he wouldn't humiliate me at my own wedding. Surely not. "But we're so proud that she found her place in the world, working her little government security job. It's not glamorous work, nothing fancy or important, but it's steady and safe, which is perfect for someone with Ashley's limited ambitions." The words hit me like physical blows. Limited ambitions. Little government job. Nothing important. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes on me, some sympathetic, others amused, all of them pitying. Michael's face had gone completely pale. His parents looked mortified. His business associates and family friends were exchanging uncomfortable glances, clearly wondering what kind of family their Michael had married into. But my father wasn't finished. To Ashley and Michael, he raised his glass higher. May their love be stronger than Ashley's simple career aspirations. May Michael's success be enough to carry them both through life, since we all know Ashley will never set the world on fire with her boring little job. The laughter that followed felt like acid in my veins. Not cruel laughter, but the kind of patronizing chuckles that said, "Oh, that poor ordinary girl, at least she found someone who loves her anyway." I looked around the room and saw everything I'd feared my entire life reflected in those faces. Pity. Dismissal. The assumption that I was exactly as ordinary and forgettable as my family had always made me feel. My hands were shaking so badly I had to put down my champagne glass. Tears were burning behind my eyes, But I refused to cry in front of all these people. Michael reached for my hand under the table, his grip tight and protective, but even he couldn't shield me from the humiliation of this moment. That's when it started. First, the quiet buzzing from my purse. Then the urgent vibrating that I'd been trained to never, ever ignore. My emergency contact phone was ringing. I reached into my purse with trembling hands, my heart still pounding from the humiliation of my father's speech. The phone display showed a number I recognized immediately. Pentagon Emergency Command Center. This wasn't just any call. This was the kind of call that meant something serious was happening, something that required immediate attention from someone with my level of clearance. I glanced around the ballroom, seeing my family still chuckling about my father's toast, completely oblivious to what was unfolding. Michael was watching me with concern, recognizing the change in my expression even though he didn't understand what it meant. "I have to take this," I whispered to him, standing up from the head table. "I'll be right back." I made my way through the crowded reception hall, smiling politely at guests who tried to stop me for congratulations, my mind racing with possibilities about why I was being contacted on my wedding night. This had never happened before. In 8 years of government service, I'd never received an emergency call during personal time unless it was absolutely critical. I found a quiet corner near the hotel's business center and answered the phone. "This is Ashley Thompson," I said quietly, using my maiden name as required for all official communications. "Director Thompson, this is Command Center Alpha. We have a Code 7 situation developing. We need you to report for immediate briefing within 2 hours. A car is being dispatched to your location." Code 7. My blood went cold. I'd only seen Code 7 protocols in training scenarios. It meant imminent threat to national security, all hands on deck, no exceptions for personal circumstances. "Understood," I replied, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. "I'll be ready." "Director, I should mention that this situation requires your specific expertise in Middle Eastern intelligence networks. The Secretary of Defense has personally requested your involvement." I ended the call and stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. In the space of 10 minutes, I'd gone from being humiliated by my own father to being personally requested by one of the most powerful people in the American government. When I returned to the reception, Michael immediately noticed my pale complexion. "Everything okay?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "I need to tell you something," I said quietly, leading him to a corner where we could speak privately. "But not here. Not now. Can you trust me for just a little longer?" He nodded without hesitation, which made my heart swell with love for this man who had chosen to marry me despite my family's attempts to diminish me. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. I danced with Michael, smiled for photos, and accepted congratulations from guests, all while my mind was focused on what waited for me in Washington. Every few minutes, I felt the subtle vibration of encrypted text messages arriving on my secure phone, updates about the developing situation that I couldn't read without compromising operational security. My family continued their celebration, seemingly having already forgotten about their casual humiliation of me earlier. Jake was holding court near the bar, telling stories about his famous clients to anyone who would listen. Emma was taking selfies with wedding guests, asking them to tag her social media accounts. My parents were basking in the compliments about what a lovely wedding they'd helped put together, as if they'd been the primary organizers rather than Michael's family. At one point, my mother approached me with a slightly tipsy smile. "You know, honey, I think this marriage will be really good for you. Michael's family has such wonderful connections. Maybe he can help you find something better than that little job of yours." That little job of yours. The phrase echoed in my mind as I looked at this woman who had raised me but had never truly seen me. In less than 2 hours, I would be sitting in a classified briefing room, helping to coordinate America's response to a national security threat. But to her, I was still just Ashley with the boring government job. "Maybe," I said simply, no longer having the energy to defend myself or explain what she couldn't understand. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I caught Michael's eye across the room. He excused himself from a conversation with his cousins and came over to me. "I know something's happening," he said quietly. "You've been checking your phone all night, And you have that look you get when you're thinking about work. What do you need to tell me? I took his hand and led him out onto the hotel's terrace, where we could speak without being overheard. The October air was cool against my skin, and the city lights twinkled below us like stars. Michael, do you remember when we first started dating, and I told you I worked for the Department of Defense but couldn't share many details? Of course. You said it was classified stuff, which I respected. Well, my job is more classified than you realize. Much more. I took a deep breath, knowing that what I was about to say would change everything between us. 3 weeks ago, I was promoted to one of the highest intelligence positions in the United States government. I'm now a senior director on the Pentagon's Strategic Intelligence Oversight Committee. Michael's eyes widened, but he remained silent, waiting for me to continue. What that means is that I coordinate intelligence sharing between agencies for matters of national security. I brief cabinet members and sometimes even the president's security team. Only 47 people in the entire country have my level of security clearance. Jesus, Ashley, he breathed. You're actually one of those people who protects the whole country. I am. And right now, there's a national security situation developing that requires my immediate attention. I have to go to Washington tonight. On our wedding night. Michael was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Then he started laughing, not with amusement but with something that sounded like amazement. What's funny? I asked, confused. Your father, he said, shaking his head. Your whole family. They have no idea, do they? They think you're some low-level bureaucrat, and you're actually one of the most powerful people in government. They have no idea, I confirmed. And they can never know. My position requires absolute secrecy. Even telling you this much is technically against protocol, but you're my husband now. I couldn't keep lying to you. Michael pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me despite the elaborate wedding dress between us. I always knew you were extraordinary, he whispered against my hair. But this explains so much. The way you talk about international affairs, the languages you speak, the way you analyze complex situations. You're not just smart, Ashley. You're brilliant. Tears finally started flowing down my cheeks, but these were different tears than the ones I'd fought back during my father's toast. These were tears of relief, of finally being seen and understood by someone who mattered. I'm so sorry I have to leave tonight, I said. This isn't how I wanted our wedding night to go. Are you kidding me? Michael said, pulling back to look at my face. My wife is a national security badass who gets called in to save the country. I'm not mad, I'm proud as hell. A black SUV with government plates pulled up to the hotel entrance, right on schedule. My ride had arrived. That's for me, I said, suddenly nervous about the transition from bride to intelligence director that I was about to make. Go, Michael said, kissing me softly. Go do whatever you need to do to keep us all safe. I'll be here when you get back. As I walked toward the SUV, still in my wedding dress, I felt a transformation happening inside me. The humiliated daughter who had sat through her father's dismissive toast was disappearing, replaced by the confident intelligence professional who had earned her way to one of the most exclusive positions in government. The driver held the door open for me with military precision. Good evening, Director Thompson. We're cleared for immediate transport to the Pentagon. Thank you, I said, settling into the leather seat. As we pulled away from the hotel, I looked back once to see Michael standing on the terrace, watching me leave with an expression of pride and admiration that my own family had never shown me. Little did I know that this night would set in motion a chain of events that would finally show my family exactly who Ashley Thompson really was. And when that revelation came, it would change everything forever. The Pentagon at midnight was a different world entirely. As our SUV approached the massive building, I could see that despite the late hour, multiple floors were still brightly lit. Emergency vehicles lined the parking areas, and I counted at least 6 other black government cars arriving simultaneously. Whatever was happening, it was big enough to pull in intelligence directors from across the region. The driver escorted me through security checkpoints that I'd never seen activated before. Military personnel with automatic weapons stood at attention as we passed through multiple scanner systems and biometric verification points. My wedding dress attracted some curious glances from the guards, but nobody questioned my presence once my identification was verified. Director Thompson, a young Air Force lieutenant, greeted me at the final checkpoint. "You're cleared for SCIF Level 7. Colonel Martinez is waiting to brief you before the main session begins." SCIF Level 7 meant Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility at the highest classification level. I'd only been in these rooms twice before during my training period. The fact that they were using this facility meant we were dealing with intelligence so sensitive that even discussing it required the most secure environment possible. Colonel Martinez, a stern-faced woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a perfect bun, was waiting for me in a small briefing room adjacent to the main SCF. She looked me up and down, taking in the wedding dress with raised eyebrows but maintaining professional composure. "Congratulations on your wedding, Director Thompson. I'm sorry we had to interrupt your celebration, but we have a situation that requires your specific expertise." "Thank you, Colonel. What are we dealing with?" She activated a large display screen and pulled up a series of satellite images and intelligence reports. At approximately 2100 hours tonight, our monitoring stations detected unusual encrypted communications originating from 3 different Middle Eastern locations. The communication patterns match those used by the terrorist network you've been tracking for the past 18 months. My heart rate immediately elevated. The network she was referring to was a sophisticated international operation that had been planning attacks on American soil. I'd spent over a year analyzing their communication patterns, financial networks, and operational structures. If they were activating multiple cells simultaneously, it meant something major was about to happen. "What kind of chatter are we seeing?" I asked, moving closer to examine the data displays. Coded references to the celebration and American gathering places. Our linguistic analysis team believes they're discussing coordinated attacks on high-profile American targets within the next 72 hours. The gravity of the situation hit me immediately. While my family had been laughing at my simple career aspirations just hours ago, I was now being briefed on intelligence that could prevent the deaths of hundreds or thousands of innocent Americans. Who else is being brought in on this? The CIA director is en route from his home in Virginia. The NSA deputy director is already here. The Secretary of Homeland Security is being briefed separately and will join us within the hour. This is going to the very top, Director Thompson. The President will be awakened for an emergency briefing at 0600. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. "What do you need from me specifically?" "Your analysis of this network's operational patterns has been the most accurate we've seen. You predicted their last 3 communication cycles within days. We need you to help us determine where and when they plan to strike." For the next 4 hours, I worked alongside some of the most brilliant intelligence minds in America. We analyzed communication intercepts, financial transaction patterns, and geographical data. My wedding dress gradually became wrinkled and uncomfortable, but I barely noticed as I became absorbed in the complex puzzle of preventing a terrorist attack. The breakthrough came at 4:30 in the morning. I was cross-referencing the timing patterns of the intercepted communications with major American events scheduled for the weekend when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. "Colonel Martinez," I called out, my voice cutting through the quiet intensity of the SCAF. "I think I know what they're targeting." Every person in the room turned to look at me. Intelligence analysts, military officers, and senior directors all focused their attention on the woman in the wrinkled wedding dress who had just spoken. The timing patterns suggest they're planning to strike during peak weekend activities at major American gathering places. "But look at this," I pointed to the display screen where I'd overlaid the communication timestamps with a calendar of events. The frequency of communications increases significantly around references to sporting celebrations and family gatherings. "Football games," Colonel Martinez breathed, understanding immediately. "Not just any football games. College football. This weekend is one of the biggest college football weekends of the season. Major rivalries, homecoming games, stadiums filled with 50 to 80,000 people each. The room went completely silent as everyone processed the implications. College football stadiums represented perfect targets for terrorists. Massive crowds, limited security compared to professional venues, emotional significance to American culture, and maximum psychological impact. "How certain are you of this analysis?" asked Director Patricia Hayes, who had arrived an hour earlier and was now acting as the senior coordinator for the entire operation. 85% confidence level based on the communication patterns and timing correlations. "But Director Hayes, there's something else." I pulled up another data overlay. The geographical distribution of the communication sources suggests they're targeting 3 specific regions: the Southeast, the Midwest, and the Southwest. If I'm right, they're planning coordinated attacks on 3 major college football games happening simultaneously. Director Hayes immediately began making phone calls to alert stadium security, local FBI field offices, and emergency response teams in all 3 regions. Within minutes, a coordinated national security response was being mobilized based on my analysis. As dawn began to break over Washington, D.C., I finally had a moment to check my personal phone. Michael had sent several text messages throughout the night. "I hope everything is going okay. I love you. Don't worry about me. Handle whatever you need to handle. Just saw some news about increased security at sporting events. Is that related to why you got called in? I'm proud of you, no matter what you're dealing with." Reading his messages, I felt a surge of emotion. Here was a man who understood that I had responsibilities beyond our personal life, who supported my career even when it meant leaving our wedding reception. The contrast with my family's attitude couldn't have been more stark. By 7 a.m., we had developed a comprehensive response plan. FBI tactical teams were being deployed to 12 major college football stadiums across the country. Bomb detection units, undercover agents, and enhanced security protocols were all being put in place. The operation required coordination between 17 different agencies and over 2,000 personnel. Director Thompson, Colonel Martinez approached me as I was finally preparing to leave the Pentagon. "I want you to know that your analysis may have saved thousands of lives today. The President has been briefed on your contributions to this operation." "Just doing my job, Colonel." "No, this was exceptional work. There will be official recognition coming, though obviously the classified nature of the operation means it won't be public." As I was finally driven back to the hotel where Michael was waiting, I tried to process everything that had happened in the past 8 hours. I'd gone from being humiliated at my own wedding reception to potentially preventing a major terrorist attack on American soil. The woman my father had dismissed as having simple career aspirations had just played a crucial role in a national security operation that would be briefed to the President of the United States. But wait, it gets worse. Because when I finally returned to the hotel at 8:30 that morning, still in my wrinkled wedding dress, I found my family having breakfast in the hotel restaurant. And they had some interesting news to share. "Ashley," my mother called out as she spotted me walking through the lobby. "There you are. We were wondering where you disappeared to last night." I joined them at their table, exhausted beyond belief but trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Michael was there too, looking concerned but proud as he took in my appearance. "I had to handle some work issues," I said simply. "Work issues?" My father laughed. "Honey, it was your wedding night. What kind of security emergency could possibly require you to leave your own reception?" Before I could answer, Emma looked up from her phone with excitement. "Oh my God, you guys, look at this news story. They're saying there might have been some kind of terrorist threat against college football games. The FBI is swarming stadiums all across the country." My heart stopped. Even though the details weren't public yet, news of the enhanced security measures was already beginning to leak to the media. "How scary," my mother said, scrolling through her own phone. "Thank goodness the government has people working to protect us from these things." The irony was almost too much to bear. My mother was expressing gratitude for the very work that I had been doing all night, work that had potentially saved thousands of lives, while simultaneously having no idea that her own daughter was responsible for the operation she was reading about. "Jake was just telling us about his new client. my father continued, apparently already bored with the terrorism discussion. A quarterback who's being recruited by 3 different NFL teams. Now that's the kind of career that makes a real difference in people's lives. I looked around the table at these people who shared my DNA but understood nothing about who I really was. They were more impressed by Jake's connection to a football player than they could ever be by my work preventing terrorist attacks. Because they didn't know about my work, and they never would. "That's great, Jake," I managed to say. "You look exhausted, honey," my mother observed. "You really shouldn't let work stress you out so much. It's just a government job, after all. There are plenty of other people who can handle whatever little crisis came up." Just a government job. Little crisis. I excused myself and went upstairs to change clothes, my mind reeling from the contrast between the night I'd just experienced and my family's complete inability to comprehend my reality. In our hotel room, Michael was waiting with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression. "How bad was it?" he asked quietly. "Bad enough that I might have helped prevent a major terrorist attack," I said, sitting down heavily on the bed. "Jesus Christ, Ashley. And your family has no idea?" "None whatsoever. And they never can know." Michael sat down beside me and pulled me close. "I can't even imagine what that must feel like. To do something that important and not be able to tell the people who should be most proud of you." "It's been my whole career, Michael. 8 years of significant achievements that I can never share with them. 8 years of being treated like I'm underachieving when I'm actually serving my country at the highest levels." "Well, I know," he said firmly. "And I'm proud enough for all of them combined." Little did I know that this was just the beginning. Over the next 3 days, as news coverage of the prevented attacks began to emerge, my family would continue to have no idea that I was involved. But something else was about to happen that would change everything. Something that would finally show them exactly who Ashley Thompson really was. The next morning, we were supposed to fly out for our honeymoon in Italy. I was looking forward to a week of relaxation with my new husband, away from the stress of both my demanding job and my dismissive family. But as we were packing our bags, my phone rang again. "Director Thompson, this is Deputy Secretary Williams calling from the White House." My heart immediately started racing. Calls from the White House were rare, even for someone at my level. "Yes, sir. The President would like to personally thank you for your work on the college football stadium operation. Your analysis was crucial in preventing what could have been a devastating attack on American civilians." "I was just doing my job, sir." "Director Thompson, I'm calling because the President wants to present you with a presidential commendation for your service. This is one of the highest honors that can be bestowed on an intelligence professional." My hands started shaking. A presidential commendation was something that most intelligence officers could only dream of receiving. The ceremony will be held at the White House next Friday afternoon. Obviously, due to the classified nature of your work, we can't release specific details to the public, but there will be a small group of family members allowed to attend. The President specifically requested that your immediate family be invited to witness this honor. Family members. At the White House. To watch me receive recognition from the President of the United States. "Sir, my family doesn't know the details of what I do. They think I work in basic government administration." "Well, Director Thompson, I think they're about to find out that their daughter is a national hero." After I hung up the phone, I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Michael was watching me with growing excitement as he began to understand what had just happened. "Ashley, was that about what I think it was about? The President of the United States wants to give me a commendation for preventing the terrorist attacks. At the White House. With my family watching." Michael started grinning, and then laughing, and then he picked me up and spun me around the hotel room. "Do you realize what this means?" he said, setting me down but keeping his hands on my shoulders. "Your family is about to find out that the daughter they've been dismissing for years is actually being honored by the President for saving American lives." I started laughing too, but there was an edge of anxiety mixed with the humor. "Michael, they're going to be so shocked they might go into actual cardiac arrest." "Good," he said firmly. "It's about time they learned who they've been underestimating." But little did I know that the White House ceremony would be just the beginning. Because when my family finally learned the truth about what I really did for a living, their reactions would be more dramatic than I could have ever imagined. And the aftermath of that revelation would change our family dynamics forever. The week between my wedding and the White House ceremony was the longest week of my life. Michael and I had to cancel our honeymoon to Italy, though I couldn't explain to anyone why. My family assumed it was because of my little government job creating scheduling conflicts, which only reinforced their belief that I was trapped in a dead-end bureaucratic position. Every day, I watched the news coverage of the prevented terrorist attacks with a surreal sense of detachment. Major news networks were praising the intelligence community's successful prevention of what could have been catastrophic attacks on American soil. Experts were calling it one of the most significant counter-terrorism victories in recent years. "Can you believe how lucky we got?" my father said during one of our family dinners that week. "Thank God the real professionals in government were on top of this situation." The real professionals. I bit my tongue so hard I could taste blood. Meanwhile, I was receiving classified briefings about the ongoing investigation. The terrorist network had been completely dismantled. 3 different cells had been arrested in coordinated raids across the country. Intelligence assets that had taken years to develop were finally paying off in concrete results that saved American lives. But to my family, I was still just Ashley with her boring government job who couldn't even take a proper honeymoon. The morning of the White House ceremony, I woke up with my stomach in knots. I had finally told my family that I was receiving some kind of recognition for my work and that they were invited to attend a ceremony at the White House. Their reactions had been typical. "A ceremony at the White House?" my mother had repeated when I called to invite them. "Are you sure it's not just some kind of group employee appreciation thing?" "Mom, the invitation specifically mentions a presidential commendation." "Well, that's nice, honey. I'm sure they recognize lots of government workers. It's probably one of those things where they honor 100 people at once for general service." Even when invited to the White House, they couldn't conceive that I might be receiving individual recognition for exceptional achievement. I spent 2 hours getting ready that morning, choosing a navy blue suit that was professional but elegant. Michael wore his best charcoal grey suit, and he kept telling me how proud he was and how much my family's perception was about to change. "Are you ready for this?" he asked as we prepared to leave for the White House. "I don't think anyone can be ready for what's about to happen," I replied honestly. We met my family at the White House security checkpoint. They had clearly dressed up for the occasion, but I could tell from their expressions that they still didn't fully grasp the significance of where we were or why we were there. "This is so exciting," Emma gushed, already taking selfies with the White House in the background. "I can't wait to post about this. My followers are going to be so jealous." "Just remember, no photography once we're inside," I warned her. "This is a secure government facility." "Oh right, because of your security job," Jake said with a patronizing smile. "You probably know all the rules about this place." If only they knew how many times I'd been in classified briefings in this building. The security screening process was more intensive than anything my family had ever experienced. They had to surrender phones, bags, and any electronic devices. Multiple ID checks, metal detectors, and background verification procedures that took nearly 30 minutes to complete. "Wow, they really take security seriously here," my mother observed as we waited in a formal reception area. "They have to, Mom. This is the White House." "Of course, dear. I'm sure your little department has some connection to White House security procedures." My little department. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. A Marine Corps officer in full dress uniform approached our group. "Excuse me, are you the family of Director Ashley Thompson?" Director Ashley Thompson. I watched my family's faces as they processed this formal title that none of them had ever heard before. "Yes," my father replied, looking confused. "But I think there might be some mistake. Ashley works in government administration." The Marine maintained perfect professional composure. "Sir, Director Thompson is being honored today for exceptional service in national security operations. Please follow me to the East Room for the ceremony." As we walked through the halls of the White House, I could see my family trying to process what they were hearing. Director, National Security Operations. These were not terms they associated with their ordinary daughter Ashley. The East Room was set up for a small, intimate ceremony. There were perhaps 30 people present: senior White House staff, high-ranking military officials, intelligence community leaders, and a few other families who were presumably there for similar recognitions. "Ashley," my mother whispered as we took our seats in the front row, "what exactly is happening here?" "You're about to find out, Mom." The ceremony began with the entrance of the President of the United States. My family had never been in the same room with a sitting president before, and I could see the awe and nervousness in their expressions as the leader of the free world walked to the podium just 20 feet away from where we were sitting. "Ladies and gentlemen," the president began, "we are gathered here today to recognize exceptional Americans who have served our nation with distinction in ways that often go unnoticed by the public. The men and women we honor today work in the shadows, protecting our freedoms and our way of life through their dedication to national security." I felt my father shift uncomfortably in his seat beside me. National security was not a phrase he associated with his daughter's career. Today, I have the honor of presenting presidential commendations to 5 individuals whose recent work has directly prevented threats to American lives. Their service represents the very best of American intelligence and counterterrorism operations. The president called the first recipient a CIA operative who had disrupted a financial network funding international terrorism. As the citation was read, detailing years of undercover work and successful operations, I could feel my family beginning to understand that this was not a routine employee appreciation ceremony. The second recipient was an FBI agent who had infiltrated a domestic terrorism cell. The third was a military intelligence officer who had provided crucial information for a successful hostage rescue operation. Then I heard my name. Director Ashley Marie Thompson, Strategic Intelligence Oversight Committee, Pentagon. The words seemed to echo in the formal silence of the East Room. I stood up and walked toward the president, acutely aware that my family was watching every step with expressions of complete shock. "Director Thompson," the president said as I approached, "your exceptional analysis of international terrorist communications led to the identification and prevention of coordinated attacks on American college football stadiums. Your work potentially saved thousands of American lives and represents the highest standards of intelligence analysis and national service." I could hear my mother gasp audibly from the front row. The president continued reading from the official citation. "Director Thompson's expertise in Middle Eastern intelligence networks and her innovative analytical methodologies have been instrumental in protecting American citizens from international terrorism. Her dedication to service, her professional excellence, and her commitment to national security exemplify the very best of American intelligence professionals." As the president pinned the presidential commendation on my jacket, he leaned closer and spoke quietly so only I could hear. "Your work last week was extraordinary, Director. The nation owes you a debt of gratitude." "Thank you, Mr. President. It was an honor to serve." I returned to my seat as the ceremony continued with the remaining recipients, but I was barely paying attention to the proceedings. All of my focus was on my family's faces, watching them process the reality of who their daughter actually was. My father looked like he was in shock. His mouth was slightly open, and he kept staring at me as if seeing me for the first time in his life. My mother had tears streaming down her cheeks, though I couldn't tell if they were tears of pride or embarrassment. Jake appeared completely stunned, while Emma was frantically trying to remember every detail since she couldn't take photos to document this moment for social media. After the ceremony concluded, there was a brief reception where family members could meet the president and other senior officials. My family stood in a small cluster, looking completely overwhelmed by their surroundings and the revelation of what they had just witnessed. "Ashley," my father approached me with an expression I had never seen before. "I don't understand. How long have you been?" 8 years, Dad. I've been working in intelligence and national security for my entire career." "But you always said you worked in government administration." "Because that's all I was allowed to say. My work is classified. I couldn't tell you that I was analyzing terrorist communications, briefing cabinet members, or coordinating intelligence operations between agencies. My mother joined our conversation, still looking shell-shocked. Honey, are you telling us that you're actually one of those people who protects the whole country from terrorists? Yes, Mom. That's exactly what I'm telling you. But we thought. She trailed off, apparently unable to finish the sentence. You thought I was a low-level bureaucrat with no ambition and no real achievements, I said gently but firmly. You thought I was the family disappointment who would never amount to anything significant. The silence that followed was deafening. My family stood there, processing years of assumptions, dismissive comments, and casual humiliation they had directed toward someone who was actually serving at one of the highest levels of government. That's when everything changed. That's when my family finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. Jake was the first to speak. Ashley, I owe you an apology. We all do. I had no idea. Of course you didn't, I replied. Because you never asked what I actually did. You just assumed I was ordinary and moved on. Emma, for once, was completely speechless. The sister who had spent years treating me like an unsuccessful older sibling was suddenly realizing that I had achieved more by age 30 than she might achieve in her entire lifetime. But it was my father's reaction that surprised me most. This man who had raised his champagne glass at my wedding reception just 1 week earlier to toast my simple career aspirations was now looking at me with something that might have been awe. The President of the United States just thanked you personally, he said quietly. You prevented terrorist attacks. You saved thousands of lives. Yes, I did. And last week, at your wedding, I said. You said I had limited ambitions and would never set the world on fire with my boring little job, I finished for him. My father's face went completely pale as he remembered his exact words from the wedding toast. The humiliation he had subjected me to in front of 200 guests now seemed monumentally inappropriate given what he had just learned about my actual accomplishments. Ashley, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I had known. If you had known what, Dad? If you had known I was successful, you would have treated me with respect. If you had known I was important, you would have been proud of me. The truth of my words hung in the air between us. My father realized that his respect and pride had been conditional on external validation rather than simply loving and supporting his daughter regardless of her career path. That's not what I meant, he said weakly. That's exactly what you meant. And that tells me everything I need to know about how you see me, how you've always seen me. The president approached our group at that moment, extending his hand to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, you must be incredibly proud of your daughter. Director Thompson is one of our nation's most valuable intelligence assets. My parents, still processing everything they had learned, managed to shake hands with the president and mumble some appropriate responses about being proud, though their shock was obvious to everyone present. After the president moved on to greet other families, we stood in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. The weight of years of dismissive treatment, casual humiliation, and consistent underestimation was finally settling on my family's shoulders. Ashley, my mother said finally, how do we even begin to apologize for how we've treated you? I don't know, Mom. How do you apologize for 30 years of making someone feel worthless when they were actually exceptional? The bluntness of my words clearly stung, but they needed to understand the full impact of their behavior. This wasn't just about one embarrassing wedding toast or a few dismissive comments. This was about a lifetime pattern of treating me as less than, of assuming I was ordinary, of never bothering to truly see or understand who I was. As we left the White House that afternoon, my family was silent during the entire car ride. The revelation of my true career had fundamentally shifted every assumption they had made about me, and they were struggling to process the implications. But wait, it gets worse. Because that evening, as news outlets began reporting on the White House ceremony, without specific operational details, of course, my extended family, neighbors, and family friends started calling with congratulations. Everyone wanted to know why they had never heard about Ashley's incredible government career. My parents found themselves in the deeply embarrassing position of having to admit that they had never understood or appreciated their own daughter's achievements. Relatives who had listened to years of subtle dismissiveness about my boring government job were suddenly asking pointed questions about how my own family could have been so clueless about my success. The social embarrassment was immediate and intense. My parents, who had always prided themselves on being well informed about their children's lives, were exposed as having completely failed to understand or support one of their children's extraordinary achievements. But the real reckoning came 3 days later, when my father asked to have a private conversation with me. We met at a quiet coffee shop near my apartment in Washington, D.C. He looked older somehow, as if the events of the past week had aged him significantly. "Ashley, I've been thinking about everything that happened, everything I said at your wedding, everything I never understood about your life and your work." "Okay," I said simply, waiting to hear what he had to say. "I realize now that I failed you as a father. Not just last week, but for years. I was so focused on achievements that fit my definition of success that I never bothered to understand what you were actually accomplishing. Dad, I couldn't tell you the specifics of my work because of security clearances. But you could have asked questions, shown interest, treated me like my career mattered even if you didn't understand the details." "You're absolutely right. And I'm ashamed that it took the President of the United States explaining your value for me to finally see it." We sat in silence for a few moments before he continued. "I want to make this right somehow. I want to be the father you deserved to have all along. But I don't know how to undo years of making you feel unimportant." Looking at this man who had raised me but never truly seen me, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Anger at the years of dismissiveness, sadness at the relationship we could have had, and perhaps the beginning of hope that things might finally change. "Dad, I can't pretend that the wedding toast didn't happen, or that years of casual humiliation didn't hurt. But if you're serious about changing how our family treats each other, then maybe we can work toward something better." "I'm serious, Ashley. More serious than I've been about anything in years." Over the following months, my relationship with my family slowly began to evolve. They started asking genuine questions about my work, within the limits of what I could discuss. They began introducing me with pride rather than dismissive explanations. Most importantly, they stopped assuming that their definitions of success were the only ones that mattered. My mother started telling people that her daughter worked in national security rather than some government job. My father began asking thoughtful questions about international affairs, clearly trying to understand the world I worked in even if he couldn't know the specifics. Jake and Emma both made efforts to rebuild their relationships with me, acknowledging that they had followed our parents' lead in treating me as less accomplished than I actually was. But the most meaningful change was in Michael's and my relationship. Having a partner who had seen me receive presidential recognition for my work, who understood the significance of what I did even when I couldn't share details, made me feel valued and supported in ways I had never experienced before. 6 months after the White House ceremony, I received another promotion, this time to Deputy Director of the Strategic Intelligence Oversight Committee. It came with an even higher security clearance and even more significant responsibilities. When I told my family about the promotion, their reaction was completely different than it would have been a year earlier. "That's incredible, Ashley," my father said with genuine enthusiasm. "You must be one of the youngest people ever to reach that level." "We're so proud of you," my mother added, and for the first time in my life, I believed she meant it. The transformation wasn't complete or perfect. Years of ingrained behavior patterns don't disappear overnight. But my family finally understood that the daughter they had dismissed as ordinary was actually extraordinary, and that their failure to recognize my worth said more about them than it did about me. As I reflect on that journey from humiliated bride to recognized national security professional, I realize that sometimes the people who should know us best are actually the least likely to see our true potential. Sometimes it takes external validation, even from the highest levels of government, to make family members recognize the value that was always there. My wedding day taught me that I didn't need my family's approval to be successful or worthy of respect. But receiving that approval, finally and completely, helped heal wounds that had been decades in the making. Today, when people ask me about my career, I no longer downplay my achievements or accept dismissive treatment. I know my worth, I understand my value to my country, And I refuse to let anyone, even family members, make me feel small or ordinary. Because I'm not ordinary. I'm a national security professional who has dedicated her life to protecting American lives. I'm someone who has been personally thanked by the President of the United States. I'm a woman who chose service over recognition, excellence over comfort, and duty over convenience. And if my own family couldn't see that value until it was validated by others, then that was their limitation, not mine. The little girl who used to read declassified CIA documents in her bedroom grew up to become someone who helped shape America's response to international threats. The quiet middle child who was always overlooked became someone whose analysis can influence presidential decisions. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about hurting the people who hurt you. Sometimes it's about becoming so successful, so valuable, and so respected that their opinion of you becomes completely irrelevant. My name is Ashley Thompson Martinez, and I am a Deputy Director in the United States intelligence community. I have saved American lives, prevented terrorist attacks, and served my country with distinction. And finally, my family knows it too. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and let me know in the comments about a time when someone underestimated you. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding your own worth. Remember, you don't need anyone else's approval to be extraordinary. You already are.